Well, my name is Professor Geoff Palmer. I live in Edinburgh in Scotland, and I was born in Jamaica, and I came to Britain in 1955 to join my mother, who had emigrated here. I wasn't educated when I came. In fact, I got my education in England. I eventually got to Leicester University, where I did a first degree. Then I got to Edinburgh University, where I did a PhD. And then I did a Doctor of Science at the Heriot-Watt University. And I became a lecturer at the Heriot-Watt University after working for the brewers and the distillers for 10 years. So I've been a lecturer from 1977 until 2008, when I retired. But I'm now Professor Emeritus, so I'm still linked with the university. I do a lot of community work with various members of the community, the Bangladesh community or the Asian community in general. And a lot of this community work is on race relations, because although I'm a scientist, I still do a lot of work for the community because that's very important. Now, in terms of my own career, as I said, I came to Britain as a boy, and I've been very lucky that I met people who helped me with my career. I did my first degree in botany, and then in Edinburgh I did my PhD on grain science, and then I developed an interest in brewing and distilling. So my professorship is in grain science and brewing and distilling. Now, in addition to teaching, I've done a lot of research. And the research I've done has been particularly important, not only for Europe in terms of grains such as barley and malt, because these are used for making beer and whiskey, but also for the sorghum grain, which is an African grain. And I spent many days and sometimes months in Africa over the last 20 years. I was working in Nigeria, I worked in Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa, all these countries, which is interesting that here's a Jamaican who in fact wasn't educated when I left Jamaica. I've never visited Africa before, but over the last 20 years, I've done a lot of research which has benefited Africa in terms of sorghum. I've also been to India and to various other parts of Asia, helping them with sorghum as well, because it's a tropical grain. And my other research is on brewing and distilling, which I'm sure you've got breweries in Africa, because some of the biggest breweries are in the west coast of Africa. And I've done a lot of work for Guinness and Heineken, and I feel that I've had two good opportunities in life. One, to do work which has benefited me and my family, but also I've done work which have benefited the community, not only in Britain, but also in Africa. I've also done a lot of community work, which is important, because race relations is still an important goal, good race relations. And for that, I've written a book. I've written two little books, one called Mr. White and the Ravens, and I've also written a more recent book called The Enlightenment Abolished. The Enlightenment Abolished is about the history of slavery. It's a history which isn't very well known. And that book outlines the history of Scottish, especially Scottish involvement, the vast amount of money, which I've described as probably the most profitable evil the world has known. There are many evils, and we can't measure them, but Caribbean or Western slavery, in which Africans were involved and also white people are involved, the fact is that our involvement has been as the slaves, but their involvement has been as the people who've made the profit. I don't think the slavery has been resolved in terms of the consequences. We often talk about harping on the past. White people always harp on the past themselves. They have Christmas and they have, Lord Nelson Day, and they have Armistice Day, and they've got all the various celebrations. But if black people start talking about slavery, they say, well, forget it, you keep harping on the past. Well, somehow we must forget a significant part of our history to please them. I don't think we should. And I think that we should do everything we can to make the world realize that the consequences of what happened over 300 years is still with us today, and that consequence, you have to go to Jamaica and see the number of murders we have. And the murders are not about robbery, it's not criminal. It's about people, frustration, poverty. And that poverty is a consequence of 300 years of people's rights being taken away, families being broken up, and people being worked to death. And I feel that anything you people can do in terms of the culture to get this message across, it's not about blame, it's not about revenge. It's about reparation. It's about doing something to make sure the children have develop a sense of that they are as valuable as anybody else in the world. And I only hope that that will be a very successful event, and God bless you all. What I'd like you to do is to support this initiative. This is very important. It's using culture to communicate the message. And the message is that we want the world to know not only what we've been through, but what our potential is.